Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Thomas Strasser. I'm the HPE Chief Technologist in our advisory and professional services organization, looking after network, workplace, and IoT practice. I'm joined today with Peter Wigleben, who is the Principal Program Lead at Microsoft for Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop, and Chris Hicks, who is a Solution Architect from Citrix. And here we go. So we talk about building the future workplace, how you develop a strategy, the technology, and build to meet that the strategy needs, and how you can avoid the common pitfalls associated with choosing platforms, different devices, achieve what HPE calls the perimeter-less digital workplace. And here I want to show you our point of view of the digital workplace, of the future digital workplace. What is the perimeter-less digital workplace? Just remember what we have told you guys about 5 years ago, what we had as a trend in UCC or Unified Communication Services, getting access to data from everywhere at any time on any device. This is something it was years ago, kind of a luxury service announcement or something. Just a few people in a company had access to those things, so-called mobility enterprise people. And now with the pandemic situation of COVID-19, we are in a new normal where this is no longer a choice. So companies, our customers are forced to enhance their capabilities to have access remotely. And this is not only access remotely from the home office, it's also the possibility to get safe back to the work. So back to work campaigns come into the play, where we have to ensure that really customers get safety into the building, don't get to places where they are occupied or where too many people are together, having things like fever detection, having things like video analytics solutions to ensure that the customers are really in a hygiene environment. And that's the future digital workplace, or the perimeter-less digital workplace we develop together with our partners, Citrix and Microsoft. And let me show how we see this journey of a smarter workplace or a smarter working environment. So here on the slide, just look at the redefined experience area. And the experience, end user experience, is one of the most important things I believe, or we believe at HPE, is in our IT environment. And only if the end user experience is on the highest level, only that will be a transformation with success, right? So that's very, very important. What else is in experience? It's also the experience the end user want to choose, right? So he want to choose the device, like he have an Apple device, or he wants to have Windows 10 devices or Android devices. So selection is usually the end user's choice and no longer the IT choice, right? BYOD come into the play. And why BYOD? Because sometimes, or what we found out during the pandemic breakout, that vendor run out of notebooks, so stock was no longer available. That means private devices were required to use. And iPads we have already at home. For that reason, it's very important to have a high level of end user experience and the end user redefined experience. Also, what I found very interesting is the solution Citrix have with Workspace with Intelligence, and I'm sure that Chris will talk about this later on a little bit more deep, but this is really enabling access to legacy applications by using so-called Workspace with Intelligence, right? And you can use this from any device. Talking about modernize and move is something where you have to have the hybrid workplace in place, right? So we know that Microsoft with the Windows Virtual Desktop solution has this approach. Same like Citrix has this approach. And we together, I won't say HPE, Citrix, and Microsoft, it's like a clue. So it's that we build this new capabilities, this new hybrid workplace, because we know that remote accessibility is something you have very much in place with a solution like Microsoft 365 is delivering. So get insight and control. I mentioned already what we have to get safe back to work. There's a lot of other things we should consider, not only the knowledge worker area, also the first line workers, engineers working on site at airports, at some service stations, right? Those things needs to be remotely done. So visual remote guidance come into the play to have things like IntelliGen in place, right? And I must say, what we can do with VDI solutions we built together with Citrix and with the Microsoft solution we have on top of these images, right? So the Microsoft Teams environment, an example, those things is a very, very strong capability we have, all three of us. So we are certified for Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop solutions as well as for Citrix solutions. So we have also certification in our company. Okay, so moving on, and I would love to have also our friends here to speak. Let me ask a question. What do you think could restrict business moving to a future workplace? Are there any common use cases preventing people moving to this new normal? Maybe Peter, you start with that.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. So definitely, like always, the world is changing, and especially last year, we saw a sudden shift to remote work. We've all seen it, right? And now that we're kind of past that, we're marching towards a hybrid or more of a blended model. And we see that some folks are starting to return to the workplace, others are not. There will be a mix. So a lot of companies, including Microsoft, are looking at a hybrid work strategy. But one thing that we know for sure is that flexible work is here to stay. The data couldn't be more clear. Everyone is looking for an extreme flexibility, and hybrid work will definitely define the post-pandemic workplace. And so luckily, both Microsoft with Windows Virtual Desktop and extended by Citrix, Chris can talk about this for hours, that gives you lots of options. It gives you lots of options on working any place, anytime, anywhere. So it definitely helps in that future strategy, making sure that, like you mentioned, Thomas, you mentioned about people bringing their own devices. Well, in the world of virtualization, that works. You can use any of the major operating systems out there. You download the client that fits or is written for that specific operating system, and you can connect, and the experience is pretty much the same. We even have, for example, HTML5 clients. So theoretically, all you need is a browser, and you can connect to your Windows workspace. You had another question about any use cases, any use cases that are preventing the adoption. I'd be happy to talk about that. But first, let me ask Chris to chime in as well, because I know that Citrix has a pretty compelling story as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, just to add on what Peter was saying, we definitely see the same trends. We see hybrid as, becoming more and more common. And I define hybrid as, it can be a lot of things, but it has a element of heterogeneity, and heterogeneity in the client, in the applications, and the data, and the how you connect, and I can go on and on. But what we see is really complexity. And I think when you ask the restrictions that may prevent people from going in this direction, I'd say the first and most obvious restriction is just the complexity of moving a workforce, in this case, as quickly as possible, from people coming into the office to working from home, using the devices, as you say, probably that they're holding in their hand. I mean, there is a whole world of complexity and details that need to be considered, not the least of which you need to make sure that you're providing good fluid user performance. And we have a lot of products and technologies with regard to Citrix, and I would say that our area of research and development is probably most preoccupied by making sure that the end user experience is as good as it can be. So getting people to work remotely will get you nowhere if what they're actually interacting with is painful, is they click a key and it takes a while, or their local printer doesn't work, or some other local connected device. Stitching those two worlds together really is a big portion of what we try to accomplish.
Very good. So I like your comments both, because this is also our findings that if you compare process with technology and people, to be successful in a transformation, people have maybe 90% of the importance to take, because technology can be delivered, and we have companies, all three of us, our companies, we can deliver the highest quality of technology, right? So this is no doubt about that. But the people are the ones who really needs to be maintained. We have, by the way, here a good approach for management of change as well, because this is something where we very early differentiate us to help customers with information portals, things. Also, not only the end user, but also the IT needs to have to go through a change, right? Change to the new normal, to the new IT, to the hybrid world, right? Okay, good. Very good discussion, like it. So to both of you, how easy is it to bring to say existing applications in this journey? How do you manage all of these technologies? I'm talking about legacy applications, right? So my best example is always SAP, right? This GUI is really hard to maintain on a PC, but with an iPhone or with an Android device, this is yeah, maybe my gray hair comes from that reason. What are your answers for that?
Peter, I'll let you go there.
Okay, yeah, I'll start, and feel free to chime in whenever you feel like, Chris. Yeah, in terms of application management, we offer many options. In general, we're trying to remove some of the complexity. Chris already alluded to it, that virtualization can be quite complex. So that's one of the things we're trying to do, is just make sure we remove the complexity, make it easier, not just for the end user, but also for the IT admin to spin up and manage a virtualized environment. If we just dive into the application landscape, Thomas, like you mentioned, one of the things we've been working on recently is something called MSIX AppAttach. And with MSIX AppAttach, you can almost say like package an application into a specific format, which allows you to layer it on top of an operating system. So what we're trying to achieve here is make Windows more modular. Imagine you have just the operating system. On top of that, you can layer a user profile. And on top of that, you can layer applications. So the applications are not installed, although it seems like that for the end user, there's no difference in experience. They will still find the application in their start menu. They can work at it just like they're used to. But in the background, it's not as deeply integrated with the operating system. The big advantage is that, let's say at some point you want to upgrade to a newer version of Windows, you just remove that bottom layer and you slide in a new version of Windows, you add the user profiles again, you add the application, and the end user didn't even notice that something has changed. But in the background, you just modernized Windows. So that's one of the things we've been working on to make everything more flexible and easier to manage.
And that's a beautiful thing. I can tell you, I mean, I've been doing this since 97, and the applications have always been, the most obvious point of complexity in the actual deployment itself. And having Microsoft, handle those moving parts, and by doing so, ensuring that there is compatibility in the way the applications are, being designed, and capabilities like Peter had mentioned, where you can, create an almost a modular approach for your applications, whereby, it doesn't necessarily get entangled with the operating system, or at least you have some means of limiting that if you need to. So, the three of us together, really, if it weren't for this, really, this solution would look nothing like it does today. And Microsoft, I would say deserves quite a lot of credit for that, and that the operating system and this particular approach, they have essentially endorsed it, and for many years, and it really provides a lot of the value and a lot of the the things that otherwise administrators would be pulling their hair out, especially the ones that are responsible for rolling out new apps, these tools and capabilities are, valuable.
Very good, very good. And I think it pretty much fits into our approach as a perimeter-less digital workplace, because we have also the use case where you don't know what device, what Android or iPhone or Windows 10 device they're using, right? It needs to be deployed independent of access to an IT hot desk, right? So it needs to be done remotely. And the only thing end user is getting is maybe email address and a password for that. And the rest must be automated, right? And I think that technology stack is absolutely prepared for that. Okay, cool. So what are the common mistakes people make when they're trying to move to a future workplace or a future perimeter-less environment? What do you think is most common about it? I think we mentioned something before already, but I want to hear it from you.
I'll start there. Is that okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, there are many things that could be, obstacles here, and many things that when you're in a rush, when you're, have the pressures of a pandemic or any other kind of world event like that, it seems like some things that get lost in the approach, in the rush, things that otherwise would be easily identified and mitigated. Security, I would say, is one area that you just don't want to rush. You don't want to skip any steps. You don't want to open up any holes. Just getting your users into this remote environment, running their applications and data wherever they may be. The model changing like that can really be a security problem if not handled correctly. So one of the reasons why you need, an experienced partner like HPE is that you need to identify that up front and be able to quickly address that in your design. And I would say that of the deployments that I'm familiar with today, that is something that people were, if they didn't do a very thorough job of, fixing that and getting it established the right way in the early stages of their deployment, they are definitely revisiting it now.
Good point.
Yeah. Let me just add to that, because it's definitely something we see as well, and it's why having a partner such as HPE is definitely helpful. Apart from security, I also see performance sometimes being sized incorrectly. Luckily, especially now that a lot of workloads are running on Azure, it's a lot easier to change that after the fact. Just imagine historically on premises, you had to purchase hardware, you bought servers with specific amount of CPUs and memory. And if you had to change that afterwards because maybe you undersized the environment, then maybe you could add some memory, but there was a max, and adding more CPUs is already a much more difficult thing to do. On Azure right now, it's a matter of a few mouse clicks. So if you want to add more CPUs or add more memory, few mouse clicks, one reboot, and you just added whatever you wanted. It also goes the other way. So maybe you oversize the environment and you're being charged more than what you actually consume. So then you can just downsize your environment with the same, few mouse clicks. So, Chris already mentioned security. Overall, I think, by the way, we have a pretty good security story. We can talk about that. I'm hoping you will ask something in that area, Thomas. But anyway, security is one. And then obviously performance is another one. But luckily, that one can be corrected quite easily.
Yeah.
I can remember.
Yeah.
I can remember, up until really this kind of flexibility was available through Azure. People would often guesstimate what their capacity requirements are. They would take like peak load, during the busiest time of day, during the busiest part of the season, and they would double it. So there were a lot of server rooms that were just out of pure fear, I think, that were really over equipped, and that inefficiency in design is, very, very expensive, of course.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think that's the the technology from Microsoft here really is a big game changer. But we also have a very nice offering together with Citrix here. It's our GreenLake VDI solution, which is also addressing the flexibility, not only in payment. You can select your VMs like t-shirt sizes, right? But also looking after managed services who will operate the things for you, right? And to combine this as an answer of the question I asked you, with GreenLake VDI, we have an option to have the VMs in the data center, the hardware of the virtualization layer in the data center of a customer, and the control panel is in the cloud. So a new hybrid approach, but with the most flexibility, of course, right? Because customers pay for the VMs they are using. And like you mentioned with the Microsoft solutions, they can select GPUs and memory as they need, but also deselect it and make it so flexible as possible. So I think we have similarities in our offerings, but together this is a really great thing for customers. Yeah. Okay, so one question is, do you feel the hybrid approach, and I mentioned an example with Citrix here, the hybrid approach is one of the most likely to be deployed?
Maybe. Yeah, I can start with that. So there's many definitions of hybrid. It's probably one of the most common words that people use, and then everyone has their own definition. You ask 10 people, you get 20 different definitions. So one of them is specifically in the world of virtualization, is that you deploy the whole virtualization environment, including your session hosts, up in Azure, for example. Or it could be that parts of the session host run on premises. That's one definition of hybrid. The other one is running everything in the cloud, but making sure you have access to your on-prem backend, which could be databases or any data source that someone needs to be productive. So if we just zoom in on that definition, the latter, and then we'll switch back to the first, we definitely see that the majority of customers, they have either an express route or a VPN or something that extends their on-prem network into the cloud, just to make sure that they can access or use applications that access backends which are hosted on premises. That's a common thing. We see that with pretty much every deployment. And I think that will be so in the foreseeable future. As much as Microsoft loves you to pull everything into Azure, we know that's unrealistic, and you will have data sources running on-prem. So luckily, we have solutions to extend that network. Then we sometimes have customers that come to us and say, well, we love the promise of Windows Virtual Desktop. We don't want to be in the business of managing the whole, gateway broker and all of the management overhead. But we have specific requirements for either regulatory or maybe compliance reasons where we want to host our virtual machines on premises. And that's where a great partner such as Citrix comes in, because they can extend our capabilities by offering those hybrid options. Great moment to maybe pass on to Chris, and Chris, you can explain a little bit about what you guys have to offer.
Sure. Thank you. Again, hybrid, many different definitions, as you mentioned, Peter. Going back to heterogeneity, that to me is one that's been consistently applied to it. And hybrid or mixed environments, anything really in a typical enterprise deployment, you're going to have exceptions that need to be accommodated, and trying to maintain something that looks like to the user a single environment stretched out over data centers spread throughout the world isn't necessarily an easy task to accomplish. And if you don't have the right tools to do it, it's an impossible task to accomplish. So I would say that one of the areas that we do help assist in is the security requirements that come from that. Typically your workloads are going to be somehow near, either through a local area network connection or some very high bandwidth availability connection. It's going to be near wherever the data is. So the data and the applications need to be able to work together, uninterrupted, high speed. Client connection, a little bit less important, still needs to be something though. But being able to access that data wherever it is, Citrix ADC is something that it will really save you a lot of complexity. Has a single point of entry into the environment, And from that point, you can aggregate your data, your resources, your collaboration tools, and make it look like a single environment to the user. It looks exactly like that. But really what you're doing is you're pulling resources potentially from all over the world. And the access to the data itself could be sped up and managed through something like SD-WAN, which does compression. I won't go into all the details, but there is many definitions of hybrid and many technologies, some of which are come from Microsoft, some of which come from Citrix and HPE, that make that a more palatable thing.
I like it. Both of your answers, because and both of you started with the right term. Hybrid have so many meanings, right? If you talk to someone in HR and say, hey, your employees needs to have a hybrid workplace, they don't think about a data center. They don't think about something on a desktop or in the cloud. They think about, hey, we need to have remote work capabilities, right? And this is very common outside our technology space. I like to have this discussion as well, because it's very much in the new normal, right? So that companies are closing offices, and maybe 50% of the seats in the offices they had before will be maintained for the future. So this is a trend I can follow here and I can see. But perfect answers, right? So we as strategists, we need to have answers on each layer, right?
Ideally.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, ideally. Okay, so last question. What are the key focus area of a virtualized solution with Windows virtualization desktop and Citrix virtualization you see?
All right, yeah, maybe I can take that one first. There's a couple of things that we're always trying to improve. One is making virtualization a cheaper solution. Historically, it was considered expensive. Chris already mentioned why sometimes it's very expensive, because people oversize the environment for a particular reason. So making it cheaper is one thing. If you look at Windows Virtual Desktop, Microsoft already owns the virtualization plane. The vast majority of our customers already have the entitlements or the licenses. So that reduces the cost quite drastically, but also making sure that your session hosts can benefit from lower pricing, or it can be scaled down, or maybe even shut down or hibernated. There's always things that we're trying to improve. That's one. Then another pillar, which I think is critical, is security. The world is changing. We see lots of bad actors out there. So making sure that your virtualized environment is safe is something we're constantly looking for. Luckily, I think we already have a pretty good story. If you look at the offerings we have today, so with M365, it has tons of security capabilities and security controls. Defender for Endpoint, for example, that has an EDR solution, so post-breach, making sure that if someone gets into your environment, you get a heads up in a very intelligent way. So all the security bells and whistles that M365 has to offer. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have lots of security capabilities in Azure Security Center. And if you look at where Microsoft is investing, that's a key area as well. So two important suites. And then on top of that, you can layer virtualization. And everyone who has worked with virtualization knows that it's fairly easy to configure it such, if you want, to just transfer pixels across the line. So imagine having a workload protected by M365, Azure Security Center, and with a few mouse clicks, you can configure it as such that only pixels are transferred over the line. Like the security promise and getting your whole security posture to a high level is fairly easy to achieve. So I think we already have, I alluded to it earlier, I think we have a pretty good security story, but it will remain one of our key investment areas. What about you, Chris? I know we talked about this the other day, so I think your story is pretty much in line, isn't it?
Very, very similar. Almost very similar approaches, very similar distribution of the R&D budget. So security always going to be a thing. One thing that I'll mention here is that I'd say the last couple of years anyway, you hear this term "good enough" batted around, which irritates me. many other terms in this business irritate me, but probably none more so than that. Think about good enough in a security discussion. I mean, it's not going to get very far. Good enough in terms of users being able to use their applications in a way they're used to, and their local devices that I already mentioned. Those are all things that need to be addressed. And between Microsoft and HPE and Citrix, we provide, I think, a very comprehensive set of technologies, and the approach, is all in line. We all recognize the vulnerabilities in the environment. The fact that the core environment is provided and supported and promoted by Microsoft is nothing but a benefit to everyone. And I can tell you, the applications, just trying to get an application to work in this environment, a few years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, I have gray hair, so yeah, I've been around for a while. It was like magic sometimes, black magic in some cases. But the fact that is an established approach, and that there were some really good security technologies to wrap around that are provided by all the companies represented here. It's at least we have the tools necessary to address and build a remote work option.
Great. Then I can only comment on, like before, we have a very, very similar view here. So our point of view, especially around security, is highlighting what you mentioned, right? So it's even that customers are overwhelmed with the settings they can do in Microsoft 365 as an example, so that they need help to figure out what needs to be done first, right? So we have our Microsoft security assessment for 365 created for those things, helping customers in that jungle, I would call it, but I'm glad we have those settings, but this is really, really something you need to have a good overview and well-skilled people for this. Hey, thank you both, Peter and Chris. For me, it feels like a perfect storm, which helps customers navigate through the pandemic and further on into the new normal perimeterless digital workplace. And again, thanks for sharing your experience. Very, very good. And thanks for your help.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.